Yes.
The things are already in. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, we can start.
That's for the.
Okay.
Right.
This here. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to introduce then?
Yes.
Or have you done that?
1 minute. 1 minute.
Okay.
Okay. We start the second seminar. 我还想动，我本来认为今天应该更多的人来参加，是吧？结果比昨天还稍微少一点点，不过也没关系，也挺多的。今天讲的这个主题吧，应该是大家都特别关心的，因为作为研究生，像我们作为老师吧，这个发表内容非常的关键。无论从你这个学生角度可能拿奖学金啊，我们老师角度要评职称啊，拿基金项目啊。
Do it forever. So the title is, how do you get your paper published in this journal? I think that until January of this year, there were two major journals in mineral processing. One was International Journal of Mineral Processing, and that journal had been going since 1972. It was also run by Elsevier, but Elsevier decided in their wisdom they couldn't afford to run two journals, so they merged International Journal of Mineral Processing with Minerals Engineering. So if you look at the top of the page, it says incorporate. Nothing's happening. Oh, it's not turned on.
Yeah, yeah.
Ah, it is.
It's hard. I'm not sure. Oh, yeah.
Wrong way around.
It's wrong. Sorry.
Okay. Why publish in Minerals Engineering? Why publish in Minerals Engineering and not one of these many open access journals which have sprung up recently? I'll also mention that Minerals Engineering is also open access. You can publish your papers in Minerals Engineering free of charge, or your institute can pay to have them published as open access. So it is an open access journal. So why publish in Minerals Engineering? Well, could we turn these lights off? Could we turn these lights off?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Why publish in Minerals Engineering? Well, it's regarded as being the world's #1 journal for mineral processing. And why is that? Well, first of all, it's got a very high impact factor. You look at the impact factor, it's well above, these are last year's figures, 2017, when International Journal of Mineral Processing still existed. So that was our main competitor, but Minerals Engineering has been slowly creeping up over the years, getting better and better. And when you compare it with other journals, Mineral Processing and Extractive Metallurgy Review, International Journal of Coal Preparation, Minerals and Metallurgical Processing, which is American journal, Canadian Metallurgical Quarterly, Journal of the South African IMM, it's obviously much above all those journals. The only journal which is above Minerals Engineering in our field is Hydrometallurgy, which is also published by Elsevier. The reason hydrometallurgy has a very high impact factor is because it deals with hydrometallurgy papers. And there are basically more hydrometallurgists around than there are mineral processors. So there's more citations per paper for hydrometallurgy than there is for minerals engineering. If you can imagine a very narrow field, such as, say, solid liquid separation, where very few people are researching in that area, if you publish a paper, it's not going to get cited that often. So that won't help the impact factor. So impact factor is not something I particularly like personally, but I know academics do, and I know people who fund the academics do. So that's very important, the impact factor. And it's creeping up all the time. It's probably going to increase at the end of this year as well. So that's a good reason to publish. If you look at the number of citations for all the articles, then there's very, very little difference between minerals engineering and hydrometallurgy. This is the number of citations in 2017, and we're talking about well over 6,000 citations. That's the number of times the journal has been cited. Papers in the journal have been cited in a year. These are the most cited articles. The reason I put this one up is to congratulate Dr. Gao here. These are the most cited articles in mineral processing, in minerals engineering, for all time, ever since the journal came into being. And if you notice here, I don't know if you can see it, but number 4 in the list is one by Zhong Gao here. Give him a round of applause.
Oh, thank you.
That's really good. That actually means a lot. And it also shows me that CSU is a university with a very, very high reputation and with some very, very good researchers. And I've been talking to many of the researchers over the last couple of days, and I'm very, very impressed indeed. So a lot of what I'll talk about this afternoon might not apply to CSU, and I'll come on to that shortly. But well done there. And you also notice that article of Zhong is 2015. It's fairly recent. A lot of these are 2014, 2013, and so on. So this is going to get better and better in terms of citations. So it might creep up even further. So very well done. It's brilliant. What's more important to me is ScienceDirect usage. You all aware of what is everyone aware of what ScienceDirect is?
Yes, we can.
ScienceDirect is the electronic version of the journal. and people can download articles from ScienceDirect. Now this is very, very important indeed, because it's okay, I'll get it there. There you are. There we go. This is very, very important indeed. If you look at the number of ScienceDirect downloads from Minerals Engineering, and you look at 2017, down here, the total of downloads was an amazing number, well over 500,000 downloads in 1 year from the journal, papers being downloaded. Now to me, this is much more important than impact factor, and this number of downloads is much higher than hydrometallurgy gets. What does it tell you? It tells you people are actually reading the papers in the journal. It's not just a figure, you know, impact factor is a figure. This is people actually wanting to see your papers, downloading them, and it's a huge number, as you can see. These are the top 5 countries which are downloading articles, and China is the grey one, 24%. Massive amount of downloads from China, which shows to me that China is very dynamic. You know, it's looking at papers, it's researching, and not only researching, looking at what other people are doing and citing those papers, and these are the number of downloads. So that's China there. This is the rest of the world. If you look at countries such as Australia, you think of Australia as being a big, really big mineral processing country, only 7% downloads. China, 24%, huge. China's up and coming. You know, China is the future in terms of mineral processing and many other things as well. This is another reason for publishing in minerals engineering. If you put a paper into a journal, you want it to be published, but also you want it to be published quickly. So this is one of the things which we've always been trying to do, rapid publication. And again, if you look at 2016 here, it's still got International Journal of Mineral Processing here. Yeah, that's International Journal of Mineral Processing. This is the number of weeks to acceptance of a paper, from putting your paper into the journal to being accepted. And you can see here that Minerals Engineering in 2016 was the lowest in terms of numbers of weeks. 21 weeks, that's all. One of the reasons I started Minerals Engineering back in 1988 is because the only journal then which was of any reputation whatsoever was International Journal of Mineral Processing. And it could take 2 years to have a paper published, which is crazy, isn't it? You know, you don't want to wait 2 years to have your paper published. But as I was talking to Ziyong at lunchtime, things were very different 30 years ago. Papers would be sent to me by post, by mail. You'd have to send 3 copies. I would then send 2 copies away to referees by post. They would review them. They would send their report back to me by post. There was no email in those days, so it came back to me by post. I decided whether it should be revised or not. If it should be revised, I sent it back to the author by post. The author would revise it, come back to me by post. I would send it back to the referees by post. They would send it back to me, and so on and so on and so on, until eventually it was published. But even so, that was much more rapid than the International Journal of Mineral Processing. Now publication is within, say, 21 weeks, which is pretty good. The number of submitted articles by region. Forget the top one, let's look down below. These are the figures for 2016, 2017 and 2018 year to date. You can see from these graphs that China is by far the biggest in terms of numbers of papers submitted to the journal. 10, 15 years ago, very, very few papers from China. Suddenly, we're flooded with Chinese papers. 10 years ago, we were flooded with Chinese papers, and it was a real pain because most of them were awful. We just had to reject them. Things have improved a lot over the years. But you can see here that China, way above all the other countries. This is number of submitted articles. And in, where's 2017, the blue one? 2017, roughly 500 papers from China submitted to the journal. It's quite a lot. You look at that other great mineral processing country, Australia, 82. No? Big difference, massive difference. Look at all the other countries. United States, only 30. So China, lots and lots of papers being submitted to the journal. So why isn't the journal flooded with Chinese papers? Well, we'll come on to that in a minute. Submitted manuscripts and editorial outcomes. Now, this here, down here, summarises everything. In 2017, the rejection rate of papers was 82%. It's very high, isn't it? So all the papers which come into minerals engineering, all of them from all around the world, 82% of them were eventually rejected. So don't think it's easy putting a paper in minerals engineering. It's worth trying, it's worth doing, but it's not easy. There's a very rigorous refereeing process. But look at the rejection rate from China, 95%. Huge rejection rate from China. So you think of all those articles which were submitted, 95% of them were rejected. I'll come on to why they were rejected in a minute. So that's important. Is there anything else on there? No, I'll leave that one. The top 10 countries in 2017 submitted and accepted. Let's look at, where's China? China here. We said there's a lot of papers submitted to the journal. 90% are rejected, and the orange part of the graph is the standard rejection rate. Well, by standard rejection rate, I mean that the papers have gone to referees, and the referees have rejected them. Okay? The blue line is called the desk rejection rate. That's me, basically, and the editors. So when the paper comes to me, I've got the first look at the paper. Every single paper which comes to the journal, I have to look at, okay? And I make a decision on that paper as to whether it goes to the editors or whether it doesn't. So most of the papers which are rejected are actually rejected by me. And look at the rejection rate. Look at the desktop rejection rate. 72% of all the papers from China are rejected by me. Small amount rejected by the editors. Now look at Australia. It's more or less equal. So very few of them are rejected by me. They're rejected by the editors. But this is worrying. For China, that's worrying. The fact that papers are being rejected before they even get to the editors. We need to see why this is so and how you can improve on this. This is how your paper is dealt with at the moment. Paper goes to Elsevier. You send your paper to Elsevier. The Elsevier looks at it and they might decide that it's not suitable for publication because the English is very poor or some formatting is wrong. It just doesn't conform with the journal. So Elsevier may reject it. Very, very few are rejected in this way. Most papers come straight through to me as editor-in-chief. What I do is look at the technical content. So I won't read every paper. There's no way I'm going to read every paper. What I'll do is I'll look at the abstract, I'll look at the conclusions, and I can tell from experience whether a paper is good or not, or whether it's likely to be published. So I approve the technical content. I approve its suitability for the journal, because a lot of the papers... Now, I'll say this now. When I talk about this massive rejection rate from China, I don't think CSU's contributing to that. I think a lot of the papers from CSU are actually being accepted early. There's a lot of universities in China which are not very high quality journals, and they send papers to me and I reject them immediately because the content is awful, and also because the scope, what they're talking about, is nothing to do with mineral processing. You know, I get papers on blasting and ventilation, long wall mining, nothing to do with mineral processing. So they're rejected. And that's a big rejection rate from China. The other big rejection rate from China is language. Now this is a problem, isn't it? You know, in that journals, English is the language of science. So you've got to publish in English. You've got to, no matter how difficult it is for you, you've got to find a way of making sure that the English is good. I have no big problems with CSU. I have big problems with other institutes, a lot of institutes. 10 years ago, I did have problems with CSU, but things have changed. People's English is now improving all the time. And what I've mentioned to a few people, and I hope the senior people take this into account, is that when you have your seminars, internal seminars, where you know your young researchers talk to your peers about what you're doing in your research, it'd be a great idea if that was done in English. You know, start to use English all the time. It'd be a good idea if your reports could be done in English rather than Chinese, because the future for you is outside China, going to the West and contributing outside China. So that's what I'm trying to instill in people. So what I do then is I look at the papers, I decide whether they should be outright rejected or whether they've got a reasonable chance of being published. Not necessarily being published, but maybe published. So if I feel that way, then what I'll do is I'll send them to one of the two editors. We've got two editors, okay? These are experienced people. We've got Pablo Brito Parada, who was originally associate editor of Minerals Engineering, and we've got Professor Christian Waters, who's been to Changsha, and he used to be the editor of IGMP. So they're two experienced people. What they do is basically the same as me. So they look at it as well. So we've got two filters now for the papers. They look at it as well. If they think it's reasonable, then they send it to the assistant editors. Each of these editors has 3 assistant editors. So now 9 of them altogether, 9 of us altogether. And the assistant editor, these are young people, very dynamic young people, very good people, who choose 2 specialist reviewers who report back for revisions, etc. Final recommendations submitted to the editor. This is this editor, who then decides to accept or reject. Once I've put a paper into the editor, I don't see it again. Okay, it's dealt with by these people. It's good in that it's giving the young the rejection rate. I think the young people probably let more papers through. I'm not sure about that, but it's just that when I look at the latest issues of the journal, they're a lot fatter than they used to be. There's more papers in there, but one of the reasons might be they've also got the IGMP papers as well now. So we won't know until next year exactly what's happening. So for you, assume all I've said is true and that the Chinese rejection rate is very, very high, but I don't think it's all to do with CSU. I think you're a very high performance. I don't think that's particularly a problem. So let's look why so many Chinese papers are rejected. What are the reasons for me rejecting them? What are the reasons for the reviewers rejecting them? Not within the scope of the journal. I've mentioned this already. It's got to be mineral processing. This doesn't apply to you at all. I'm sure none of you are going to put papers into the journal on long wall mining or ventilation. You're all mineral processors and extractive metallurgists. So that's not going to apply to you. The English does not meet the journal standard. Some of the English is awful in some of the papers from China. Not so bad from you. It's improving all the time. but it could be better. So make sure that when you submit a paper to the journal, you've talked to people whose first language is English and they can help you with that paper. Because nothing the referees makes them very irritated when they see bad English, and they might just reject it and you lose your paper. So make sure the English is good. That's very, very important. The format and the figures are poor. I don't think that will apply to you. I think you all know that you must look at the guide for authors before you put a paper into the journal. Very important. Don't just write a paper. Write it in the format required for minerals engineering. So you must look at the guide for authors. The experiments are not well designed statistically. There's a lot of the papers are rejected because of this, but again, I don't think yours are. I think your experiments are pretty well designed. You know all about statistical design of experiments and so on. That's important. So really not a lot of this is for you. This might apply. The work is not generically innovative. I reject a lot of papers and I say, I'm rejecting because your paper is not generically innovative. And what that means is that, let's say you're writing a paper on a particular mine's operation and your results show that by adding, say, more collector or a different collector, you can improve the performance of that particular ore. Well, that's not generically innovative. It's very useful for that particular mine, but it might not be useful for other mines. You must have science. Science must come into this. That kind of paper we call anecdotal. It's a bit like me saying, oh, I've got a bad back. And I've found that the best way of dealing with it is to hang on a door frame for 10 minutes. Really worked, you know. That's anecdotal. You might try it, but it's not scientific. So you see what I'm saying? Is that your paper must be scientific. It must have generic interest. Now this is important. How can you increase your chances of publishing in minerals engineering? Now this is really what I want to talk to you about, and it's something you're starting to do now. How can you increase your chances? Well, very easily. Present your paper at an MEI conference, okay? And then submit to a virtual special issue of the journal. I don't know if you know what a virtual special issue is, but I'll explain it. There's a very intimate link between MEI conferences and minerals engineering. There always has been, okay? So papers presented at a minerals engineering conference, an MEI conference, are peer reviewed at the conference because you talk to people at the conference, you put a draft paper in. So you've got a much better chance of publishing a paper if you presented at an MEI conference. Going forward. Here we go. So I said that the overall rejection rate of papers from Minerals Engineering Journal in 2017 was 82%. But it was only 53% for papers which were published in a virtual special issue. And this year to date, the rejection rate for virtual special issues is only 36%. There's a much better chance of getting your paper accepted in a virtual special issue. Now, what's a virtual special issue? This is from the ScienceDirect page, Minerals Engineering, and a few of you went to Flotation 17 in Cape Town. What a virtual special issue is your paper is submitted to the journal, okay? If the paper is accepted for publication, it's immediately published in a regular issue of the journal. Now this is a new thing. In the past, if you submitted a conference paper to the journal, then it would go into a special issue which was in hardback. There's no special issue now in hardback. And what this means is that your paper is published much more rapidly, But as soon as it's accepted, it goes into a regular issue. But it's also compiled electronically into a virtual special issue. So you look at these papers, which is still being compiled for last year's Flotation 17. All these papers are published in different regular issues. As soon as the paper is accepted, it's published in a regular issue. Then it's listed in a virtual special issue. Okay? You all understand? Let's look at one of them. I've got one down here. New advances in the understanding of flotation collectors, a Chinese experience. This was presented last year at Flotation 17 by people who are in here now. Yeah? Any of the authors in here? Any of the authors for that paper in here now? No? Okay. Anyway, that's a CSU paper. Okay? And if we look at that paper, there we are. Those are the authors at the top. And if you look at the, it was published in March 2018. But you look at this, it was received on the 8th of December 2017. Well, the conference was in November, okay? The paper was received in December. It was revised in December, on the 29th of December, sent back to the authors, who sent it back, and it was accepted on the 5th of January, a week later, 1 week later, okay? And then it was available online on the 12th of January. So within 2 months, that paper had been accepted, and it was online in ScienceDirect. So it's very, very rapid and a lot easier to publish if it goes through an MEI conference. If you look at what I showed you before, this is how regular issues to the journal are dealt with, non-conference papers. This is how they're dealt with. It's a long, laborious process, but it's the way Elsevier run it now, and this is the way they want to run it. But when we started this, I said to Elsevier, fine, you can do this, but not for MEI conferences. MEI conferences are going to be, the papers are going to be dealt with exactly as they were 10 years ago, before the other editors came in. I'm going to be the sole judge of the papers. So what happens now with a MEI conference is that paper goes to Elsevier after the conference, then comes to me as editor-in-chief. I can still reject papers, no problem. You know, not all conference papers are suitable for the journal, but I can still reject papers, and then I'd send to reviewers. So it's as simple as that. It cuts down all the intermediate operations, makes it much faster. And why do we do it this way? Because when you go to a conference, the conference itself acts as a peer review. Because you have to, as Zeong will tell you this, you have to submit a draft paper. The draft paper goes into a proceedings. The proceedings is available at the conference. And when you present your paper at the conference, people will have your PDF of your paper, which they'll discuss with you. And so you'll think, oh yeah, that's a good idea. We'll do that. So you might revise it. You revise it, and then you submit your final paper after the conference, not before the conference. So after the conference, you submit your final work. So it's already been peer reviewed. So the amount of peer review after that is fairly minimal. So I'll look at it and say, yeah, that's good. I might even accept it outright with no reviewers needed. I might reject it. I might send it to reviewers. But the chances are that because I've seen it and I've sent it to reviewers, it's going to be published. How do you get your paper in a VSI? Well, first of all, you submit a short abstract to the conference. That's sent to me. It doesn't go to Elsevier. So if you want to present a paper at any MEI conference, and I'll put a list of them up shortly, you submit a short abstract to me. 150 words, that's all I need. Okay? And then MEI will decide whether that abstract is good enough for the conference. If it's in the scope of the conference, if it's reasonable, it looks reasonable in terms of scientific content, then that paper will then be accepted for the conference, okay? And if you, this is really important for you now. If your abstract is accepted for a conference, you must give a firm commitment. And this is one of the things I wasn't very pleased with a few months ago. We had a biohydrometallurgy conference in Namibia, and there are a few papers from CSU submitted. They're accepted for presentation orally, and then a few weeks before the conference, the author said, "We can't come, we're too busy." That's bad. If you do that, you're going to be blacklisted. It's going to also blacklist this CSU. It's very, very poor to do that. It's not very professional. So if your abstract is accepted for a conference, give a very firm commitment that you'll attend, either orally or by poster, and then apply for a visa. Because our conferences are in South Africa and the United Kingdom. You need visas. Can take quite a long time to get a visa, and a lot of people have to back out at the last minute because they apply for the visa only 2 weeks before the conference. As soon as you've got an abstract accepted, you know you're going to be coming to the conference, apply for your visa immediately, email us and we'll give you a letter of invitation to the conference which will help with your visa. But don't leave it too late. That's very, very important. So this is really the most important bit for you. Then submit a draft paper. You'll be asked to submit a draft. It won't be refereed. It's just it's a draft which goes into proceedings, totally unrefereed. If you're presenting as a poster, this is optional. You don't have to submit a draft, but I would say submit it. Submit your draft, because it will then be discussed by the people at the conference. So that's important. Submit a draft paper. Present your paper then at the conference. You must attend now the conference, and encourage discussion. And by encourage discussion, I mean talk to people. You know, don't just sit around drinking coffee. Go and talk to people, and make sure that they talk to you and you get their advice. Because you'll find that at these conferences, all the top people in our field will be there, and all of them are quite amenable to young people coming up to them and talking. So that's very, very important. The most important thing you ever do in your careers is talk to people. Talk to people at every opportunity. Very important. Then you submit your final paper to Elsevier. So after the conference, you can go away. You've had some good ideas from people at the conference. You can then submit a final paper. Look at your draft and submit your final work. And then that will be refereed, as I said. This is a typical MEI conference. There's Dr. Zhao there. And look at who's on that picture. You've got people like Professor Graham Jameson from Australia. You've got Professor Ralston from Australia. So you've got a lot of really good people at these conferences. You can talk to them, and they've all got a glass of wine, so it's quite informal, you know. So that's important, talking to people, being at the conference, talking to all these people. That one was taken into, I don't know how many of those are CSU. Do you recognise many people on there? But that was taken in Falmouth, in Cornwall, United Kingdom. It's the Biohydrometallurgy Conference in 2012. And there's a very big contingent of Chinese delegates. And some of those, well, quite a lot of them were from CSU. I don't know which. 9 of them.
9 of them from this school.
9.
Yes.
9 of those from CSU. Yeah. So came to Falmouth in Cornwall and presented their work. There's a bio conference next year in Falmouth, which I hope they'll also attend. So it's good to have you here and to talk to people and so on, and that's how you get your paper published quickly. These are the upcoming MEI conferences. Try and be at some of them. I know some of you are going to be at Flotation 19 next year in Cape Town. Zeong will be there, and quite a few other people will be there. We've got physical separation next year in the United Kingdom. That's things like gravity concentration magnetic separation, solid liquid separation, anything which is physical. I don't include flotation in there. Flotation is a bit physical, it's a bit chemical. So we've got a separate conference for flotation. I'm sure a lot of you are involved in modelling, computational modelling. That's a very good one to be at. And that's back to back with physical separation. So those are two-day conferences. It's worth going to both of those, and we'll give you concessions if you come to both conferences. It's a pity a lot of you didn't see this one, which is high-tech metals, which is next month in Cape Town. That's dealing with things like lithium, rare earths, all the things you're dealing with. The CSU would have been good to have had you there. Might be too late now, but if it's not too late, we can still take your papers. But we'll be running that again in 2 years' time in Falmouth in the UK. Comminution, anyone involved with comminution? That's every 2 years. The next one is in 2020 in Cape Town. Very important for you, biomining. We now call it biomining, we don't call it biohydrometallurgy, because it also deals now with things like acid mine drainage and even flotation using bioreagents. So biomining next year, hope to see some of you there. And that's back to back with sustainable minerals, environmental aspects. So 2 conferences there which should suit quite a few of you. I've got a few of these if anyone wants a copy. I didn't expect so many people here, so I've only got about 30 copies, but I'll leave them with you. And that's it. So we hope to see your papers regularly. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
大家有个了解吧，就是说这个文档怎么处理的，然后怎么被拒的，然后具体原因是什么的啊？然后大家有什么问题没有？请踊跃发言，好吧？这个大家有什么问题没有 ？Any questions？ 有没有问题啊？没问题。
Well, what kind of chapters on the field of mineral processing would attract the junior more? What kind of chapters? Characters. What kind of chapters will attract the junior more? Just
What kind of topics are more attractive to you or to the topics?
Oh, it doesn't matter. If it's mineral processing, extractive metallurgy, fine. Yeah. I don't say, oh, I don't want papers on flotation of such a thing or anything like that. Anything which is mineral processing, extractive metallurgy, is viable.
If it prefers the energy cases, just.
No, I mean energy case is obviously important. So if you're working on energy, yeah, excellent. If you're trying to reduce energy in, say, comminution, then you're going into comminution content. So it's a flotation. If it's just general, that could go into sustainability.
Thank you. 还有问题吗？敢问啊，你这个很难的机会，其实大家为什么就是说不敢说嘞？我跟搞不清楚。问啊，感觉有没有问题啊？感觉都能自信满满能发，很容易发出去是吧？据考虑95%，100个有95篇被拒的，所以说还是可以问一下我。有没有博士啊？啊？没有问题啊？
Wait.
Because I'm working on the computational modeling
Yeah.
by DFT calculations, and I do a lot of work, but most of them are focusing on DFT calculation. But the background is over rotation or communication. I mean, commuting. Yes.
For computation modeling.
Yeah, but it was
That would cover anything. So anything. Because we're looking at just ways of, this is just modeling, computation modeling. So it could be comminution, flotation, anything. DEM, CFD, anything. Yeah. Yeah. So it's technique, that conference is more or less techniques. Yeah. Yeah.
还有问题吗？好 ，OK，
OK。
那谢谢大家啊。那有什么问题就可以课后问我也可以了啊。基本上我因为我也做一些期刊编委，所以我基本上也了解流程，然后据稿的原因啊什么的，大家可能和我沟通更容易一些。然后祝大家多发好文章啊！好，谢谢大家。